My name is Alara, and until last year, I was just another mid-level manager drone at a faceless IT company in suburban Pennsylvania. 33 years old, single, a decent apartment, a manageable car payment. Life was fine. Then my grandmother, Nana May, passed away, and everything exploded. Nana May was my anchor, my dad's mom. She was the only consistent presence in my life after my parents' divorce when I was 8. Mom remarried this guy, Dale. He wasn't a bad guy, per se, just incredibly there. And then came Ava, my half-sister, 5 years younger than me, blonde, bubbly, and perpetually the center of attention. Nana May always made sure I didn't feel invisible in the shadow of Ava's sunshine. She was my champion, the one who saw me, really saw me, even when everyone else was blinded by Ava's achievements. Nana May's house was, well, it wasn't much. A 2-story colonial built in the late 70s, perfectly maintained but definitely dated. Avocado green appliances, floral wallpaper, shag carpets in shades of orange and brown. Thankfully, she replaced that years ago. But the garden. Oh, the garden. Nana May had a green thumb. Roses, hydrangeas, peonies, irises, a riot of color that bloomed from spring until frost. Every morning, waking up and seeing that garden, hearing the birds, it was peace. It was her. When she died, I was devastated, but I was also named as the sole beneficiary of her estate, which primarily consisted of the house. At first, I considered selling it. The money would have been a huge help. I was drowning in student loan debt and thought about going back to school. But the thought of some stranger ripping out her garden, painting the walls beige, it felt sacrilegious. So I moved in. The commute to work was a killer, an hour and 15 minutes each way, battling the Philadelphia traffic. But those first few months, they were bliss. Waking up to the bird song, having my coffee on the porch surrounded by Nana May's flowers, it made it all worthwhile. It felt like she was still there, watching over me. I felt closer to her than I had in years. 3 months after I moved in, my mother, Carol, paid me a surprise visit. That should have been my first red flag. Carol doesn't do surprise unless it's carefully calculated to benefit her in some way. She sat at my kitchen table, stirring her coffee, always with 2 sugars, even though she claimed to be on a diet. That's what she does when she wants something. The Lizzie, honey tone followed. I hate being called Lizzie. Nana May was the only one who could get away with it. Lizzie, honey, she began, her eyes fixed on her spoon. Dale and I have been talking. That commute of yours must be just dreadful. Over an hour each way? In this traffic? I nodded, bracing myself. Mom never brings up problems without a solution, conveniently ready to go. And her solutions almost always benefit her. That's just how she operates. She finally looked up, her eyes bright with what she probably thought was cunning. We have a proposal. She paused, letting the weight of her brilliance sink in. Our house is only 20 minutes from your office. What if we swapped? We'll move here, and you take our place. You just need to keep paying the mortgage. The world swam for a moment. Their house was newer, built in the early 2000s. Updated kitchen, stainless steel appliances, a walk-in closet, something I'd only dreamed of. And, yeah, the location would slash my commute by over an hour each day. But something felt off. The way she presented it, so casual, so expectant. What about the paperwork? I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. Shouldn't we get everything in writing? Deeds, titles, the works? Mom waved her hand dismissively, like swatting away a pesky fly. Oh, honey, we're family. Why waste money on lawyers? You know I'd never do anything to hurt you. Looking back, the red flags were practically waving like banners in a parade. But at the time, it seemed almost logical. Foolishly logical. I wanted to believe her. I needed to believe her. The thought of cutting my commute by that much, it was intoxicating. Plus, there was a part of me, deep down that craved her approval. Maybe, just maybe, this was her way of showing she cared. I know it sounds pathetic now, but that's where I was at the time. Blinded by a sliver of hope and a whole lot of exhaustion. The move happened quickly. Carol and Dale were practically giddy, packing boxes with a speed I hadn't seen since Christmas morning when Ava was 10 and got a pony. Yes, a pony. I tried to ignore the nagging feeling in the back of my mind, the little voice whispering, "This is too easy." I shoved it down, telling myself I was being cynical, that I should just be grateful. Their house was exactly as I'd imagined, sleek, modern, and blessedly close to work. The kitchen. Oh, the kitchen. Granite countertops, a massive island, a gas range that could cook a Thanksgiving feast in record time. I settled in, religiously making the mortgage payments. I even started paying a little extra each month, telling myself it was an investment in my future, a way to pay the house off faster. Carol and Dale seemed pleased with my diligence. They visited often, commenting on how much better the place looked. "You've really got a knack for decorating, Lizzie," Mom would say, never quite meeting my eye. It's such an improvement. For a while, everything seemed perfect. The house swap appeared to be working out for everyone. I had a shorter commute, a modern home, and what I thought was a solid arrangement with my family. I was finally feeling like I was getting somewhere. Then, Ava announced her engagement. The wedding planning started almost immediately, and Mom transformed. She became a whirlwind of Pinterest boards, color swatches, and seating charts. Every time I visited Nana Mae's house, their house now, the conversation revolved around venues, dresses, and caterers. I started to notice things, subtle changes to the house that I hadn't seen before. New landscaping, an elaborate stone walkway leading to the front door, freshly painted shutters. Expensive improvements, but I didn't think much of it at the time. "We want to make the place perfect for the wedding photos," Mom explained when I commented on the new rose bushes. "You understand, don't you, honey? It's going to be such a beautiful celebration." I did understand, or at least I thought I did. I even offered to contribute extra to the mortgage payments to help offset their wedding expenses. I was feeling generous, flush with success at work, and eager to support my family. Mom accepted my offer with that same dismissive wave she'd used when I suggested getting lawyers involved in our house swap. "Oh, honey, that's so sweet of you." The words were warm, but her eyes were cold. Calculating. Looking back at those early months, I can see all the warning signs I missed. The way Mom and Dale were so quick to accept my extra payments, how they never wanted to discuss transferring the deed. Once the mortgage was paid off, the increasing frequency of their emergency expenses that somehow always seemed to coincide with my bonus payments. But hindsight is 20/20, isn't it? And I was about to learn just how blind I'd been to their true intentions. I was about to walk headfirst into a nightmare I never saw coming. Ava's wedding day is etched in my memory, a grotesque parody of happiness played out on the hallowed grounds of my grandmother's house. The ceremony was held in the backyard, the same backyard where I'd chased fireflies as a kid, where Nana Mae had taught me how to prune roses, where I'd scraped my knee falling out of the swing set. Now it was transformed. Expensive landscaping, designer decorations, a rented white gazebo dripping with flowers. I watched my half-sister float down the makeshift aisle in a gown that probably cost more than my first car. Organza, lace, beads, a ridiculous confection of wealth and entitlement. I tried to ignore the knot in my stomach, the same knot that had been growing tighter and tighter for months. Every time I visited, something was different about the house. New furniture, fresh paint, high-end appliances replacing the perfectly functional ones I'd grown up with. Mom kept talking about making the place wedding-worthy, but it felt like they were erasing every trace of Nana Mae's presence, scrubbing away the memories like unwanted stains. The wedding itself was extravagant. Open bar, gourmet catering, a live band that played cheesy pop songs at ear-splitting volume. The works. I couldn't help wondering how they were affording it all, especially since I knew they were still paying off credit card debt from Ava's college years. But whenever I tried to bring up finances, Mom would deftly change the subject. "Oh, Lizzie, don't worry your pretty little head about that. We're family. We trust each other," that trust card. She played it so well. In the months following the wedding, my work schedule intensified. A major project meant longer hours, frequent meetings, and a whole lot of stress. It was during this time that Mom started calling more often, usually right before I was about to receive my quarterly bonus. There was always some emergency that needed immediate attention. Roof repairs at their house, property taxes higher than expected, an unexpected medical bill for Dale's bad back. And each time, I dutifully added more to my mortgage payments, believing I was helping my family while simultaneously investing in my future. What a fool I was. Then came the business trip. 2 weeks in Chicago for a series of client presentations. Nothing unusual. I traveled for work plenty of times. But the morning I left, something felt off. Mom gave me a hug at the door, a little too tight, a little too long. "Don't worry about anything here, honey," she said, her smile not quite reaching her eyes. "We'll take care of everything while you're gone." Those words, they would come back to haunt me soon enough. They were a promise of betrayal, a carefully concealed dagger aimed straight at my heart. I just didn't know it yet. The trip to Chicago was brutal. Late meetings, endless PowerPoint presentations, forced networking events where I had to smile and pretend I was genuinely interested in hearing about synergy and leveraging core competencies. I barely had time to check my personal emails, let alone return Mom's increasingly frequent text messages. I figured she was just being anxious about the house, maybe the weather or some other trivial thing. I couldn't have been more wrong. By the time my Uber pulled up to my house on that chilly evening, all I wanted was a hot shower, a glass of wine, and my own damn bed. I was exhausted, both mentally and physically. I just wanted to go home. That's when I noticed the porch light was on. It was never on. Nana May always turned it off to save electricity, and I'd continued the habit. I also heard voices coming from inside. Laughter, the clinking of glasses. It sounded like a party. But I hadn't invited anyone. A prickle of unease ran down my spine. Maybe Mom and Dale were having friends over? It was a Tuesday night, but who knew? I fumbled in my purse for my keys, my fingers clumsy with fatigue. When I finally found them, I inserted the key into the lock and turned. Nothing. It wouldn't budge. I tried again. And again. Confusion started to morph into panic. What the hell was going on? Just as I was about to call a locksmith, the door swung open. There stood Ava wearing my favorite slippers. My ridiculously fluffy, pink bunny slippers that Nana May had given me for Christmas when I was 12. Ava was looking at me like I was an unwanted solicitor, some stranger trying to peddle magazine subscriptions on her doorstep. Behind her, her husband Chad lounged on my couch, feet up on my coffee table, a half-empty beer bottle in his hand. He was wearing one of Dale's old football jerseys and looked like he hadn't showered in days. "Oh, you're back?" he drawled, leaning against the doorframe with a smirk that I wanted to wipe right off his face. "Your stuff's in the garage." I stood there, suitcase still in hand, my brain struggling to process what I was hearing. "My stuff? What are you talking about?" "This is my house." Ava rolled her eyes, examining her perfectly manicured nails. Nails that our parents had always paid for, even when they claimed they couldn't afford my college textbooks. Not anymore. She looked up, her eyes cold and hard. "Mom and Dad gave it to us as a wedding present. We're living here now." The world tilted sideways for a moment. My knees threatened to buckle. "Are you insane? I've been paying the mortgage on this house for years." "Yeah, about that." Ava shrugged, looking exactly like Mom when she was about to dismiss someone's feelings. "That's not really my problem. Mom and Dad gave us the house, so..." She made a shooing motion with her hand. "You need to leave. Get off our property before we call the cops." Standing there on my own porch, suddenly homeless and betrayed, a torrent of memories flooded back. All the times Ava had gotten special treatment. The new iPhone when I was still using a flip phone. Designer clothes while I got hand-me-downs. The brand new car for her 16th birthday while I took the bus. Now, she was taking my home too. The home that Nana May had left to me. The home I'd worked so hard to keep. The rage that surged through me was unlike anything I'd ever felt before. It was hot, burning, consuming. I wanted to scream, to lash out, to tear them both apart. But I knew that wouldn't solve anything. I needed to stay calm. I needed to think. I turned and walked back to my Uber, the driver watching me with a mixture of confusion and concern. "Take me to my parents' house," I said, my voice shaking with barely suppressed fury. "And step on it." I had a feeling this wasn't over. Not by a long shot. My hand was already formed into a fist when I reached the front door of my parents' house. Nana May's house. Their house. I hammered on the door, the sound echoing through the quiet suburban street. "Mom! Open up! We need to talk about what Ava just did." I heard movement inside, whispered voices, footsteps approaching the door. My heart pounded in my chest. They had some explaining to do, but the door didn't open. "Lizzie?" My mother's voice came through the door, muffled but clear enough. "Go away." "What?" "Mom, open the door. Ava just locked me out of my house. The house I've been paying the mortgage on for years. That's not your house anymore." My stepfather's voice joined in, deeper and more menacing. "And this isn't your house either. This is our house now." The words hit me like a physical blow, cold, calculated, and utterly devoid of compassion. They had planned this. All of it. The generous offer, the compliments, the extra mortgage payments. It was all a carefully orchestrated con. "How could you do this to me?" I cried, my voice cracking with despair. "I'm your daughter." Silence. Then, Mom's voice again, colder than ice. "You're not a very good one." That was it. That was the breaking point. I stumbled back from the door, tears streaming down my face. I couldn't breathe. The betrayal was too much. Too profound. I didn't know where to go. I didn't know what to do. I was alone, stranded, utterly and completely shattered. I drove aimlessly for hours, the city lights blurring through my tears. I ended up at a cheap motel on the outskirts of town, a place that smelled of stale cigarettes and desperation. I paid for a room in cash, too numb to even feel embarrassed. That night, I barely slept. Images swirled in my mind, Nana May's garden, Ava in my slippers, Mom's dismissive wave. I kept replaying every conversation, every interaction, searching for clues I'd missed, for some indication of their true intentions. But there was nothing. They had been so convincing, so loving, so fake. The next morning, I woke up with a pounding headache and a burning sense of betrayal. I felt like I'd been punched in the gut, repeatedly. But beneath the pain, a flicker of something else began to emerge. Anger. I was done being a victim. I was done being manipulated. It was time to fight back. The first thing I did was call a lawyer. I found a name online, a Mr. Thompson, who specialized in real estate law. I explained my situation, my voice trembling with rage and desperation. He listened patiently, asking clarifying questions, taking notes. When I was finished, he said, "Miss Alara, this is a complicated situation, but I believe we have a strong case. Let's get to work." And just like that, a tiny spark of hope ignited in the darkness. I had a lawyer. I had a chance. Maybe, just maybe, I could get my life back. Mr. Thompson was a bulldog, a short, stocky man with a perpetually furrowed brow and a voice that could cut through steel. He didn't mess around. Within days, he had prepared all the necessary eviction documents, meticulously laying out the facts of the case, my mortgage payments, the lack of a written agreement, the sudden and unceremonious lockout. He called me the following week, his voice grim. Miss Alara, I'm ready to serve the eviction notice. Are you prepared to be there? I hesitated for a moment. The thought of confronting my mother and Ava again filled me with dread, but I knew I couldn't back down. This was my fight. Yes, I said, my voice firm despite the tremor in my hands. I'll be there. The day we served the notice was surreal. The sun was shining, the birds were singing, and the daffodils in Nana May's garden were in full bloom. It felt like a cruel joke, a picture-perfect setting for the ugly scene that was about to unfold. Mr. Thompson drove me to the house. He parked across the street, a discreet distance away. He adjusted his tie, took a deep breath, and turned to me. Remember, Miss Ilara, let me do the talking. This could get ugly. I nodded, my stomach churning with anxiety. I watched as he walked across the street, his briefcase clutched firmly in his hand. He looked like a man on a mission, a legal warrior ready to do battle. He reached the front door and knocked, a sharp, professional rap that echoed through the quiet neighborhood. I held my breath, watching, waiting. Mom opened the door. Her face, usually carefully made up and composed, was pale and drawn. She looked like she hadn't slept in days. When she saw Mr. Thompson, her eyes widened in alarm. "Good morning, Mrs. Carter," he said, his voice crisp and businesslike. "I'm here on behalf of your daughter, Alara, the legal owner of this property. I'm serving you with an eviction notice." He handed her the documents, his movements precise and efficient. Mom stared at the papers in her hand, her face crumpling with disbelief. This can't be happening," she stammered, her voice barely a whisper. "There must be some mistake." "There is no mistake, Miss S. Carter, Mr. Thompson said, his voice unwavering. "You have 3 days to vacate the premises." He turned and walked back to the car, leaving Mom standing on the porch, clutching the eviction notice like a death warrant. I watched her, a strange mix of emotions swirling inside me. Pity, anger, sadness, and a small, almost imperceptible flicker of satisfaction. She had hurt me deeply, betrayed my trust, and tried to steal my home. She deserved this. As Mr. Thompson pulled away from the curb, I glanced back at the house. Mom was still standing on the porch, staring after us, her face a mask of fury and despair. I knew this was just the beginning. The next 3 days would be the longest of my life. But I also knew that I had taken the first step towards reclaiming my life, towards righting the wrong that had been done to me. The battle had been joined, and I was ready to fight. The 3 days that followed were an exercise in agonizing patience. I stayed at the cheap motel, unable to face the prospect of being anywhere near Nana May's house. I spent the time alternating between frantic phone calls with Mr. Thompson and scrolling through endless true crime documentaries, trying to distract myself from the gnawing anxiety that threatened to consume me. Every hour felt like an eternity. I imagined Mom and Dale scrambling to find a new place to live, packing their belongings, desperately trying to salvage their shattered scheme. I imagined Ava, furious and entitled, blaming everyone but herself for the mess they were in. I also imagined Nana May, watching over me, her presence a silent comfort in the midst of the chaos. I pictured her in her garden, tending her roses, her hands calloused but gentle. I imagined her telling me to be strong, to stand my ground, to never give up. On the 4th day, Mr. Thompson called. His voice was surprisingly cheerful. "Miss Alara, I have good news. Your parents have moved out. The house is clear." Relief washed over me, so intense it almost made me weak. It was over. I had won. "Are you sure?" I asked, my voice still trembling with disbelief. "Are they really gone?" "Yes, ma'am, Mr. Thompson said. I personally inspected the property this morning. They took everything with them. The house is yours." I hung up the phone and burst into tears. Tears of relief, tears of anger, tears of grief. It was a complicated mix of emotions, a cathartic release after weeks of pent-up stress and fear. I drove to Nana May's house, my heart pounding with a mixture of anticipation and trepidation. I parked in front, took a deep breath, and walked up the driveway. The house looked forlorn. The landscaping was overgrown, the paint was peeling, and the front door was slightly ajar. It looked like a house that had been abandoned, a house that had lost its soul. I pushed open the door and stepped inside. The air was stale and musty, heavy with the scent of dust and neglect. The furniture was gone, the walls were bare, and the floors were covered in a layer of grime. It was a shell of its former self, a hollow reminder of what had been lost. I walked through the house, room by room, surveying the damage. Drawers had been left open, clothes were strewn about, and dishes were piled in the sink. It looked like they had left in a hurry, abandoning their lives in a frantic escape, but there was no major damage. No broken windows, no vandalized walls, no deliberate destruction, just emptiness, a profound and unsettling emptiness. I stood in Nana May's living room, the same living room where I'd spent countless hours as a child, listening to her stories, playing games, and feeling safe and loved. Now it was just a vacant space, a hollow echo of the past. As I stood there, a thought struck me with crystal clarity. I was done. I was done paying their mortgage. They had broken our verbal agreement the moment they locked me out of the house I'd been paying for. Now, they could deal with the consequences. I walked over to Nana May's old rocking chair, the one she always sat in while she knitted or read. It was still there, tucked away in a corner, covered in a layer of dust. I brushed it off, sat down, and closed my eyes. I could almost feel her presence around me, her spirit watching over me, guiding me. And for the first time since this nightmare began, I smiled. I had lost a lot, my trust, my money, my family, but I still had Nana May's house, and that was more than enough. I spent the next few days cleaning Nana May's house, scrubbing floors, washing windows, and wiping away the accumulated grime of neglect. It was hard work, both physically and emotionally, but it was also cathartic. With each swipe of the sponge, each stroke of the broom, I felt like I was reclaiming my life. Piece by piece, I unearthed Nana May's old photo albums from the attic, carefully dusting them off and flipping through the pages. There were pictures of her as a young woman, radiant and full of life. Pictures of my dad as a child, grinning mischievously. Pictures of me, awkward and gangly, but always with Nana May's arm around me, her smile warm and reassuring. I found her gardening tools in the shed, rusty but still functional. I spent an afternoon tending her roses, carefully pruning away the dead branches and watering the thirsty soil. I felt her presence with me, her hand guiding mine, showing me how to coax life back into the neglected garden. I couldn't stop thinking about all the money I'd poured into my parents' place, all the extra mortgage payments, all the emergency expenses. It was a staggering amount, a sum that could have significantly improved my own life. But at least I still had Nana May's house. At least I hadn't signed over the deed like they'd wanted me to. Sometimes, the hardest lesson to learn is that you can't trust everyone, even family. Especially family. They should have been the ones to protect me, to guide me, to love me unconditionally. Instead, they had exploited my trust, manipulated my generosity, and tried to steal my home. But as I sat in Nana May's rocking chair, watching the sun set over her garden, I knew I was stronger for having learned that lesson. I had lost a family, but I'd found myself, and that was worth more than any house, any amount of money, any fleeting sense of approval. The doorbell rang, startling me out of my reverie. I hesitated for a moment, my hand instinctively reaching for the baseball bat I'd propped against the wall. I was still jumpy, still wary of unexpected visitors. I peered through the peephole. It was Mr. Thompson. I took a deep breath, unlocked the door, and let him in. "Miss Alara," he said, his voice grave. I have some concerning news. My heart sank. What now? Had they found some legal loophole? Were they planning to sue me? I've been reviewing the mortgage documents, Mr. Thompson continued, and I've discovered some discrepancies. He pulled a file from his briefcase and opened it on the coffee table. He pointed to a series of numbers, his brow furrowed in concentration. According to the bank records, he said, you paid an additional $75,000 above the required mortgage payments over the past 4 years. I stared at him, dumbfounded. Yes, I said. I know. I was trying to pay the house off faster. But here's the thing, Mr. Thompson said, his voice low. Only the minimum payments were ever applied to the mortgage. The additional funds, they were diverted elsewhere. My blood ran cold. What do you mean, diverted elsewhere? Mr. Thompson sighed. I mean that your parents were consistently withdrawing the excess funds almost immediately after each deposit. The truth hit me like a punch to the gut. Those emergency house repairs, the unexpected medical bills. It was all a lie, a carefully constructed web of deception designed to bleed me dry. They were stealing from me, I whispered, my voice trembling with rage. My own parents were stealing from me. Mr. Thompson nodded grimly. It appears so, Miss Ilara. It appears so. The next few days were a blur of anger, disbelief, and frantic activity. Mr. Thompson launched a full investigation, subpoenaing bank records, interviewing witnesses, and piecing together the puzzle of my parents' financial deceit. What he uncovered was even more shocking than I could have imagined. The emergency house repairs that I'd been funding weren't repairs at all. They were fabrications, elaborate stories designed to extract more money from me. The roof repair was actually a new deck and pergola. The plumbing issue was a hot tub installation. The essential landscaping was a complete redesign of the backyard, complete with a koi pond and an outdoor kitchen. And the unexpected medical bills? Those were cosmetic procedures, Botox, fillers, and a tummy tuck for my mother, Carol. But the worst part was that Mom had been planning this for years. Mr. Thompson found emails between her and several real estate agents from before the house swap, discussing how to structure the arrangement to their advantage. She'd even consulted a financial advisor about ways to maximize the income potential from their investment property, meaning my additional mortgage payments. I felt sick to my stomach. It was all so calculated, so premeditated, so utterly devoid of any semblance of love or compassion. They had seen me as nothing more than a walking ATM, a source of unlimited funds to fuel their extravagant lifestyle. Mr. Thompson presented me with the evidence, bank statements, emails, invoices, and credit card bills. I stared at the documents, my hands trembling with rage. Designer clothes, spa treatments, expensive restaurants, all charged during the same months. They were telling me they needed extra help with essential repairs to Nana May's house, European vacations, shopping sprees, and, of course, AVA's lavish wedding. It was all there, in black and white, a testament to their greed and their utter disregard for my well-being. Some family friends reached out to me, cautiously offering their condolences. Apparently, my parents had used much of that money to fund an extravagant lifestyle, a life of luxury that they couldn't afford on their own. I learned they'd always lived beyond their means, racking up debt and relying on credit cards to maintain a facade of wealth and success. My cousin Lisa called me, her voice tight with anger. She told me she'd found evidence that they'd tried to pull similar schemes with other family members, but no one had fallen for it like I had. They'd asked Lisa for a loan to cover a business opportunity, but she'd smelled something fishy and refused. Now, she realized that I was just the unlucky one who'd trusted them. Ava and her husband, meanwhile, had fallen on hard times. Without my extra payments subsidizing their lifestyle, they couldn't maintain the mortgage on their own. I heard through mutual friends that they were 3 months behind on payments and facing possible foreclosure. The irony didn't escape me. The very house they tried to steal from me might end up being taken by the bank. It was a small comfort, but a comfort nonetheless. Mr. Thompson advised me to pursue legal action to recover the misappropriated funds. He said we had a strong case for fraud, given the documented pattern of deception and the written evidence of premeditation. I hesitated for a moment. The thought of dragging my own parents into court filled me with a sense of dread. But then I remembered Ava in my slippers, Mom's dismissive wave, the callous words through the locked door. I made my decision. "Let's do it," I said to Mr. Thompson, my voice hard and unwavering. "I want every penny back." The lawsuit was a messy, drawn-out affair. It dragged on for months, filled with depositions, interrogatories, and endless legal wrangling. My parents denied everything, claiming that the extra payments were gifts, freely given and without any expectation of repayment. They argued that they had every right to use the funds as they saw fit. They painted themselves as victims, claiming that I was a spoiled, ungrateful daughter who was trying to ruin their lives out of spite. They even tried to subpoena Nana May's will, arguing that she had been mentally incompetent when she signed it and that they were entitled to a share of her estate. The lies were outrageous, the accusations absurd, but they were relentless. They hired a high-powered attorney who specialized in family law, a slick, well-dressed woman who knew how to twist the facts to her client's advantage. The stress of the lawsuit took a toll on me. I lost sleep, I lost weight, and I became increasingly withdrawn. I found myself constantly replaying the events in my mind, wondering if I could have done anything differently, if I could have seen the betrayal coming. Mr. Thompson kept reassuring me that we had a strong case, that the evidence was overwhelmingly in our favor. But I couldn't shake the feeling that I was fighting a losing battle, that my parents would somehow find a way to wriggle out of their responsibility. Through it all, I clung to the memory of Nana May, her strength, her wisdom, her unwavering love. I imagined her telling me to keep fighting, to never give up, to believe in myself. The trial finally began several months later. It was a public spectacle, with reporters and photographers camped outside the courthouse every day. My parents played to the cameras, portraying themselves as loving, hard-working people who were being unfairly targeted by their own daughter. Ava testified on their behalf, claiming that I was always jealous of her success and that I was trying to punish them for favoring her. Her husband, Chad, also testified, looking uncomfortable and evasive. I took the stand, my hands shaking, my voice barely above a whisper. I recounted the events of the past year, from Nana May's death to the lockout to the discovery of the misappropriated funds. I presented the evidence, the bank statements, the emails, the invoices. I tried to remain calm, to control my emotions, but the tears kept welling up in my eyes. I looked at my parents, sitting at the defense table, their faces impassive, their eyes cold. I wondered how they could do this to me, how they could betray me so completely. The trial lasted for 2 weeks. The jury deliberated for 3 days. Finally, they reached a verdict. Guilty. The judge ordered my parents to repay the $75,000 in misappropriated funds, plus interest and legal fees. He also imposed a punitive damage award, finding that their actions were malicious and intentional. I sat in the courtroom, stunned, as the verdict was read. It was over. I had won. But as I looked at my parents, their faces ashen, their bodies slumped in defeat, I felt no sense of triumph, only a profound sadness, a deep and abiding sense of loss. I had won the lawsuit, but I had lost my family, and that was a price I would pay for the rest of my life. The aftermath of the trial was complicated. The local news covered the story extensively, portraying me as a wronged daughter who had bravely stood up to her manipulative parents. Some people lauded me as a hero, while others criticized me for airing my family's dirty laundry in public. My parents predictably blamed me for everything. They refused to speak to me, sending angry, vitriolic emails and text messages accusing me of destroying their lives. They claimed that the lawsuit had bankrupted them, that they had lost their house, their friends, and their reputation. Ava surprisingly reached out to me. She sent a lengthy email apologizing for her role in everything. She admitted that she had been naive and entitled, that she had blindly trusted our parents without questioning their motives. She said she was ashamed of her behavior and that she was trying to make amends. I was skeptical, but I agreed to meet her for coffee. She seemed genuinely remorseful, humbled by the experience. She told me that she had been forced to get a job for the first time in her life, and that she was finally starting to understand the value of hard work and responsibility. I didn't forgive her completely, but I was willing to give her a second chance. We started exchanging occasional texts and emails, slowly rebuilding our relationship. It was a fragile connection, but it was a start. My relationship with my parents, however, remained fractured. They continued to deny any wrongdoing, refusing to accept responsibility for their actions. They saw themselves as victims, and I was the villain in their story. I tried to make peace with the situation, to accept that they were never going to change. I realized that I couldn't control their behavior, but I could control my own. I decided to cut ties with them completely, to protect myself from further emotional abuse. It was a difficult decision, but it was the right one. I needed to focus on healing, on rebuilding my life, on finding happiness. I couldn't do that while I was constantly being dragged down by their negativity. I threw myself into my work, earning a promotion and a significant raise. I started taking evening classes in financial management, determined to learn everything I could about investing and budgeting. I joined a support group for survivors of family financial abuse, finding solace and understanding among people who had experienced similar traumas. I spent more time at Nana May's house, transforming it into a sanctuary, a place of peace and healing. I repainted the walls in her favorite colors, restored her garden to its former glory, and filled the house with her cherished belongings. I started hosting small dinner parties for my friends, creating a chosen family, a group of people who loved and supported me unconditionally. We laughed, we shared stories, and we created new memories together. Life wasn't perfect. I still had moments of sadness, moments of anger, moments of doubt, but I was stronger, more resilient, and more determined than ever before. I had lost a lot, but I had also gained something invaluable: self-respect. I had learned that I was worthy of love, of trust, and of happiness, and that was a lesson I would carry with me for the rest of my life. Time began to heal the rawness of the wounds, though the scars remained, a constant reminder of what I'd endured. The financial stability I'd craved before all this mess became a reality. I paid off my student loans, started a retirement account, and even invested in a small rental property, a cautious step, but one that felt empowering. I continued to attend the support group, eventually becoming a facilitator myself, hearing other people's stories, witnessing their struggles and their triumphs, helped me put my own experiences into perspective. I learned that I wasn't alone, that family financial abuse was far more common than I had ever imagined. I started volunteering at a local community center, teaching basic financial literacy classes to low-income families. It was incredibly rewarding to help people avoid the traps that I had fallen into, to empower them to take control of their finances and build a better future. One day, I received a letter from Mr. Thompson. He informed me that my parents had filed for bankruptcy. They had been unable to repay the judgment from the lawsuit, and they had been forced to liquidate their assets. He said that there was a small chance I might recover some of the money they owed me, but it was unlikely. The bankruptcy trustee was already overwhelmed with creditors, and my parents' assets were minimal. I wasn't surprised. They had always been financially irresponsible, living beyond their means and relying on debt to maintain their lifestyle. Now, they were finally facing the consequences of their actions. I decided not to pursue the matter further. I had already spent enough time and energy fighting them. I was ready to move on with my life. Besides, I knew that the real victory wasn't about the money. It was about reclaiming my self-respect, about setting boundaries, and about protecting myself from further harm. It was about creating a life that was authentically mine, free from their manipulation and control. A year passed. Ava and I continued to rebuild our relationship, slowly and cautiously. We weren't close, but we were civil. We met for coffee occasionally, sharing stories and offering each other support. She had changed significantly. She was no longer the entitled, materialistic girl I had known growing up. She was working hard, paying her own bills, and taking responsibility for her actions. She had even started therapy to address the emotional damage caused by our parents' manipulation. I was proud of her. I knew it wasn't easy for her to break free from their influence, but she was doing it, and I was there to support her however I could. One day, she called me, her voice hesitant. "Lizzie," she said, "I have something I need to tell you. It's about Mom and Dale." My heart sank. What now? Had they gotten into more trouble? Were they trying to contact me? They're living in their car," Ava said, her voice cracking with emotion. "They lost their apartment a few months ago, and they haven't been able to find another place." I was stunned. My parents, who had always been so concerned with appearances, who had always strived for a life of luxury and comfort, were now homeless. I don't know what to do," Ava continued. "I can't afford to help them. I'm barely making ends meet myself." I hesitated for a moment. A part of me wanted to turn my back on them, to let them suffer the consequences of their actions. They had hurt me deeply, betrayed my trust, and tried to steal my home. They didn't deserve my help. But another part of me, a part of me that still yearned for their love and approval, couldn't bear the thought of them living on the streets. They were still my parents, no matter how flawed they were. I took a deep breath. "I'll help," I said to Ava, my voice firm. But on my terms. My decision to help my parents wasn't easy. It was a battle between my head and my heart, a struggle between logic and emotion. Logically, I knew they didn't deserve my help. They had made their bed, and they should lie in it. Emotionally, however, I couldn't abandon them completely. They were still my parents, no matter how terrible they had been. I couldn't stand by and watch them suffer. I laid out some ground rules. I wouldn't give them any money directly. I would only provide assistance in the form of basic necessities, food, clothing, and shelter. I would help them find a safe place to live. But it had to be a modest apartment, nothing extravagant. And they had to agree to seek professional help for their financial irresponsibility and their emotional issues. Ava agreed to the terms. She said she would talk to Mom and Dale and convince them to accept my help. A few days later, Ava called me back. She said Mom and Dale had reluctantly agreed to my conditions. They were desperate, and they had no other options. I started searching for a suitable apartment. I found a small one-bedroom unit in a quiet neighborhood, far from the affluent suburb they had once called home. It was nothing fancy, but it was clean, safe, and affordable. I paid the first month's rent and security deposit, and I helped Mom and Dale move their few remaining belongings into the apartment. It was a somber occasion. They were both subdued and ashamed, their faces lined with regret. I didn't offer any words of comfort or forgiveness. I simply told them to follow the rules and to seek the help they needed. Then I left. I continued to provide assistance for several months, paying their rent, buying them groceries, and ensuring that they were attending their therapy sessions. It was emotionally draining, but I felt like I was doing the right thing. Slowly, things started to improve. Mom and Dale began to take responsibility for their actions. They started attending debt counseling, learning how to manage their finances more effectively. They also started working on their emotional issues, addressing the underlying insecurities and anxieties that had driven their manipulative behavior. They even started apologizing. Sincere, heartfelt apologies for the pain they had caused me, for the betrayal, for the lies. I didn't forgive them immediately. It took time, patience, and a lot of soul searching. But eventually, I realized that they were truly remorseful. They had learned their lesson, and they were committed to changing their ways. Our relationship began to heal, slowly but surely. We started talking on the phone more often, sharing stories and offering each other support. We even started visiting each other occasionally, spending time together at Naname's house, reminiscing about the past and creating new memories. It wasn't the same as it had been before. The trust was gone, and it would never fully return. But we were finding a new way to relate to each other, a way that was based on honesty, respect, and mutual understanding. One day, Mom called me, her voice filled with emotion. "Lizzie," she said, "I want you to know that I'm proud of you. You've become a strong, compassionate, and successful woman, and I'm so grateful that you gave us a second chance." I smiled, tears welling up in my eyes. "I'm proud of you too, Mom," I said. "You've come a long way, and I'm happy that we're finally starting to heal." The healing process was far from over, but it was a start, and that was all that mattered. Years passed, the raw edges of the past softened, replaced by a sense of acceptance and a cautious optimism. The scars remained, a roadmap of the pain I'd endured, but they no longer defined me. I had transformed them into symbols of strength, resilience, and hard-won wisdom. My career continued to flourish. I became a senior manager at the AITA company, leading a team of talented individuals and spearheading innovative projects. I thrived on the challenges, finding satisfaction in my work and a sense of purpose in contributing to something bigger than myself. My personal life blossomed as well. I met someone special, a kind, intelligent, and compassionate man named Ben. He was everything I had ever wanted in a partner: supportive, understanding, and genuinely interested in my happiness. He knew about my past, about the betrayal and the trauma, and he never judged me for it. He embraced me with all my flaws and imperfections, and he helped me to heal from the wounds that had been inflicted upon me. We bought a house together, a small but charming bungalow in a quiet neighborhood. It wasn't Nana May's house, but it felt like home. We filled it with love, laughter, and a sense of belonging. My relationship with Ava continued to grow stronger. We became close friends, confiding in each other, sharing our joys and our sorrows. She was a constant source of support and encouragement, and I cherished her friendship. She had become a successful businesswoman, starting her own marketing agency and building a thriving career. She was independent, confident, and fiercely determined. She had finally found her own path, and she was shining brightly. My relationship with my parents, while not perfect, had also improved significantly. They were living a modest but comfortable life, managing their finances responsibly and attending regular therapy sessions. They were genuinely remorseful for their past actions, and they were committed to making amends. They were never going to be the parents I had always dreamed of, but they were trying, and that was enough. One day, Ben proposed. He got down on one knee in Nana May's garden, surrounded by her roses, and asked me to be his wife. I said yes without hesitation. Our wedding was a small, intimate affair, held at Nana May's house. Ava was my maid of honor, and Mom and Dale were in attendance, beaming with pride. As I walked down the aisle, I felt Nana May's presence with me, her spirit watching over me, blessing our union. I knew she would have been happy for me, that she would have approved of Ben, and that she would have rejoiced in my happiness. The wedding was a celebration of love, of family, and of hope. It was a testament to the power of forgiveness, to the resilience of the human spirit, and to the possibility of healing even the deepest wounds. As I stood there, holding Ben's hand, surrounded by my loved ones, I realized that I had finally found peace. I had overcome the challenges. I had faced the darkness, and I had emerged stronger and more resilient than ever before. I had lost a lot, but I had also gained so much. I had gained a loving partner, a loyal friend, and a renewed sense of family. I had gained self-respect, self-confidence, and a deep and abiding sense of gratitude. I had learned that the past doesn't have to define the future, that it's possible to heal from even the most profound betrayals, and that love can conquer all. And as I looked out at the faces of my loved ones, I knew that I was finally home. This is the end of my story, or perhaps just the beginning of a new chapter. Thank you for listening. Thank you for your support. And thank you for reminding me that even in the darkest of times, there is always hope.